Module 2.5, Beyond the Team Handbook. So as we have looked into building a great environment for the team, that goes through defining the way of working and also roles and responsibility. Here in this module, we will cover how to define the ways of working in a studio. And I want to share an example here of how I have approached it. Even before I formed the team, I built a team handbook. A team handbook is basically where you list all the ways and the culture of the studio, what are the behaviors you wish in the studio, what are the processes that you would like to happen in the studio to serve your mission and your values and the culture you want to build in the studio. So let me dive into it. So my handbook, and I will put the link here, is among the materials that you can download. I call it my DNA team handbook, or do not assume handbook. Why is that? It's because in the end, as individuals, we are very complicated. It's complex collaboration, human collaboration. And there's a difference between what we say, what we think, and what we think we say. So imagine the whole complexity when there's a group of people working together with all the assumptions they have in their mind to try to talk to each other and make sense even of what they are saying to each other. So I wanted to build a team handbook to make it very explicit for the team how we wish to work, instead of making it implicit and assuming that everyone will work the same way without talking about it. So it's bringing the implicit to the explicit through a handbook. And in this handbook, I covered different topics. So the first part here is the design. And like I said, it's in the materials, so you can go through it, browse it, and take the parts that resonate with you. Of course, for each team, a handbook is very personal, and I'm sure you'll define your own that works the best for you, but at least I hope the structure and the framework will help you. And so for this part on the design, it's more how do we decide what to and not to do. So this part is really important to cover the question like how do we ideate? How do we come up with new ideas? What is our studio committed to do? So for example, are we going for full innovations when we look for new ideas? Or do we have a rules of innovation? So in our handbook, we are going more for 80-20 rule of innovation, where 80 is proven and known and 20 is innovation. We decided to go for this now at this stage of a studio because it's really important first that we get a first success and financial stability before we can go a bit more wild in innovation. But for each team it will be different, but this is where we define how do we go about the innovation. How do we disagree? How do we debate on design decisions? Who makes the last call? Who makes the last decision? That's where we define all these rules or how we approach the design. How do we put the player at the center of our design? And we are very human-centered team and very player-centric, where all decisions are for the good of the player. But that might be different for other teams, and it's something worth clarifying as well in this part. The second part of the handbook is about team and feedback. How do we improve our work together? So in this part, it covers more, for example, how do we give feedback to each other? How do we reflect on what we have been doing as a team? How do we go with the conflicts? How do we approach our one-on-one? How do we give critical feedback? How do we give praise to each other? In which way? In which forum? So all these things are rules and covering the behaviors that are wished for the studio. And it's very important, I would say, related to the culture, because the way we give feedback, the way we receive feedback tells a lot about the culture we are building in our studio. Then the third part is about workflows. How do we work more effectively? So this part touches all the part related to processes that are planning. How do we work? How do we plan? How are we flexible on the planning? How do we make decisions? How do we run meetings, for example? And on the meetings is one that I'm very assertive about, because I think it can go easily where meetings become the norm and how your day goes. And I'm really against meetings that are unnecessary just for the sake of going in meetings. So we have a whole section dedicated to meetings about being mindful of meetings. Why do we need this meeting? On which frequency? Who should be attending the meeting? How prepared should we be for the meeting to be the most effective possible? And all this is written down also in our handbook. And then the last part is about creative workplace. So how do we nurture and foster our creativity in our team? So this part touches more like all the things that are a bit more wild in our studio. So how do we approach our team events? What are they about? What do we learn? How do we approach training in our team? How do we even take time off? So in our team, for example, we have a unlimited holiday policy. And how do we go about that? How do we organize these unlimited holidays? How do we understand in the team how important it is to have this time of not crunching, for example, to keep our mind creative, to find the best solutions? And by being stressed, for example, or overworking, definitely this is not where we will have the best creative solutions. So this is really the section where we define all the things that help us to be more creative about what we do to create the best games for our players. And at last, I have a part about team mottos. And this is the part I like to remind often to the team. So the team handbook, I use it for onboarding, even hiring. Sometimes when people have a lot of questions, what is the culture in your studio? I don't want to throw some values because they are not very concrete and specific. But when I share the team handbook, they really understand our way of working, and either they sign for it or they don't. And it's fine, it's for the best. But the team handbook is really a tool for communication with the team, where every quarter I go through it again, just to remind in case people forgot or people who join and are not familiar with it yet. And at last, we have these team mottos that I add up over time to just refresh our mind of what are the key things that could define our way of working. And one that I really like to remind to the team is this one. What is the worst thing that can happen? Let's remember that we are not saving lives at the hospital. Because often I see that we are, as a team, are very passionate, but also stress ourselves a lot and put a lot of pressure on ourselves to perform, to succeed, to make the best game ever. And that's a very noble goal and drive. But this is where, as well, a lot of individuals can burn out. So it's important for me to remind as well for people to take it slow and take a step back, because if we don't do it for today and do it for tomorrow, nothing dramatic will happen. And that's something important to remind. So think about building your team handbook. I'll share the structure in the materials of this class, and then you can take it as you feel. But I would say it's really important that you clarify all your processes, your behaviors, your way of working, wished, especially as a team lead, in a team handbook. Good luck with that.